final exercise of this course is creating a one-shot adventure, which has only one main plot. But we realize many of you want to run longer games or campaigns. So here's what you need to know about applying what we've learned so far to a long-form game. In an ongoing campaign, several plots can coexist. We aren't limited to one villain or one conflict. Multiple things can happen simultaneously, and each session can push one or more plots depending on the player's choices and the things you choose to bring to the table. Perhaps you want to begin foreshadowing a new conflict when the current plot enters the falling action, or maybe two different conflicts occur simultaneously, and that by itself is a complication, forcing the characters to choose which is more important to them. Be careful with that one though, because it can lead to the players splitting the party, and that tends to complicate your life. We may want to connect a few plots to create a feeling of one cohesive storyline. One way to achieve that is to pick a very powerful villain for the end of your campaign and think about their grand goal. The characters will not face that villain immediately, but they will begin to encounter the repercussions of their actions in the setting. Perhaps the first adventure conflict will involve a minion that betrayed the villain. Later, they may encounter a horrible experiment the villain created, which can be tied to the conflict of another plot. As the characters grow in power and renown, they get closer to the source, and eventually, the central conflict of the last plot will take them to face the main villain. A campaign that is built like that may look a bit like this. As you can see, each plot creates a peak in tension followed by a relief, but the overall curve goes up, with the highest point of tension being the climax of the last plot. This is an ideal. But don't worry if some plots end up being less tense than others. Remember that building tension is a skill. If you keep trying to build tension in your plots, you will become better at it, and your players will become more engaged over time. Until now, we've only discussed plots that are relevant to the entire party. But in a campaign, we probably want to consider individual character plots. Such plots are opportunities for each of our players to shine and develop their characters, to bring their story into the limelight and truly grow. Character-driven plots are probably the best way to connect the characters into your world and make the players care about the game. They are also a great way to help the characters bond, because when they help each other overcome their personal problems, their relationships become stronger. In a campaign, I like using something called the N+1 Rule, which means that if you have N players, your campaign should have at least N+1 plots. So at the very least, each player gets a plot that revolves around their personal character conflict, and one plot for all of the party together. It's important you take that into consideration when beginning your campaign, so you can start weaving character plots right away. A character plot is like any other plot, except the premise and the source of the conflict are already defined by the character's backstory and the loose ends it contains. When we created the characters with our players, we talked about grounding them in the setting and creating meaningful relationships. This is why we did that. Player characters should always have loose ends that we can pull on. Someone they love, someone they hate, a promise they must keep. We can use all those to create a conflict that compels each character and makes them feel the story is really about them. When we don't have a backstory to work with, it's difficult to do that. In the next lesson, we are going to offer several mindsets and guidelines that can help you during the process of story design. See you there!